One of the things I read about quite a bit and look at videos about and try to write about myself, or find myself writing about, is consciousness. And I've been to quite a few conferences which have consciousness as a major theme. I was at one a couple of days ago, and I'm going to one in Hong Kong in a few weeks' time. And in a sense it's fine, because although the conferences that I've been to which are at least themed around consciousness, well, they're almost never about consciousness really. That just seems to be like a gateway to talk about all kinds of other things. But to the extent they are about consciousness, I find myself having very mixed feelings about it actually, because I really appreciate being conscious for reasons that I'll talk about in a second, hopefully, and appreciate the idea of it. But I also think it's completely overblown in some areas. I think there's far too much consideration, far too much respect, if that's the right word, given to the idea of consciousness. Well, actually that's not quite true. I think there is necessary respect for reasons again which I'm going to try and get to, but the wrong kind of respect. I think it's given far too much attribution, it's far too global an idea, and I'm particularly irritated when the idea of consciousness is wheeled into kind of metaphysical and spiritual discourses, as if consciousness is synonymous with universality or spirituality or something like that. That's where I get really frustrated by that. And see if I can get to why that's the case. I mean, one of the things, certainly being conscious is fantastic, and I like that a lot. And it's certainly productive of and produced by some very interesting phenomenon. Here I'm just reminded of I'm reminded of a couple of things really. I'm reminded of Michael Polanyi's writing in The Structure of Consciousness, where he talks about depth perception. I think I mentioned this before actually. My dog's just seen a rabbit. Let's see what happens with that. Morning. But in that particular essay by Michael Polanyi, what he talks about is how the right and the left eye produce slightly different images because of the parallax effect, and those differences are sufficient to produce, by the action of the brain, this experience we have of depth. In other words, our consciousness of depth is constructed by that process, which is really, really fantastic, very interesting. And I'm also reminded of something that David Bohm talks about, where he says that, and this is something I experience every morning actually, when you get a coffee cup and you see the top of it, it's unproblematic that you see the top of the coffee cup as circular, even though you almost never actually see the circle. If you did, you'd have a lap full of coffee. What you see is a series of ellipses that changes in shape slightly as you raise it and tip it. But you don't see those ellipses, or you're not thinking, oh, this ellipse is changing shape. It takes quite an effort of will to see it as an ellipse. You unproblematically see it as consciousness, as see it as a circle. It's almost as if some part of your brain is doing kind of virtual fly-through of the space around your cup and constructing the circle out of those imaginary experiences, just like plotting the mathematical necessity of that. It is a circle. And again, it's formative of consciousness. You're consciously aware of it as a circle. And that's remarkable, I think. It's just fantastic. But that's not all there is to it. You know what I mean? It's just not all there is to it. My consciousness also tells me that I'm living in a three-dimensional world. Phoebe! Sorry, my dog's just seen the dog. My consciousness constantly tells me that I'm living in a three-dimensional world. Phoebe, guy, come on! Come on, puppy. Come on. And I'm living in this three-dimensional Cartesian space. Broadly speaking, Newtonian, very simple physics in operation. And no experience that I have is disconfirming that. I have to step outside of consciousness to know that that's not all there is. I have to employ quite complex interpersonal strategies, pretty much bloodless strategies really, mathematical processes. I have to use organs of sense-making, mechanisms of sense-making if you like, which are which aren't in my body. and the kind of pictures they paint as a universe are fantastic. They're far more complex, they're far more interesting, I suspect, than the three-dimensional coffee cup depth perception world that my consciousness presents to me. But I have no access to that. Phoebe, guy, come on! I don't have access to that. In other words, there's a kind of viewpoint on the world, and here I'm aware that I'm using embodied metaphors, but there's a kind of viewpoint on the world which consciousness will not give me access to. Consciousness is a necessary limitation, and I'm fine with that, but for me at least, it says, you know, why are we being so laudatory about consciousness when it has this limitation? It's another better way of doing it. The other thing I have about consciousness, and why I say it is this kind of double-edged sword, is that consciousness is also consciousness of pain and suffering and fear. In fact, I think it's probably partly produced by pain and suffering and fear, for reasons I'll try and get into another time. And you know, to be alive, I don't want to sound too much like a Buddhist here, to be alive is to be aware of pain and suffering and fear. And that's not really a good thing. There must have been a way of putting the universe together which didn't involve pain and suffering and fear. There really must. I can easily imagine a universe or a world in which, instead of being prevented from experiencing pain and fear by the sheer unpleasantness of those experiences, we just experience them as kind of forces of gravity or something like that. How do? Not so bad, you?
He's gone now.
Has he gone off, has he?
No, we're on the way back.
Oh, all right. See you later. Yeah. Oh, here he is, look. Hello, Bruno.
Come on, quick! Bruno!
Bruno, come on!
Bruno!
Anyway, I'm just talking about pain and suffering and fear. I think I'll probably at the end of this video. But certainly those things evolved to stop us. Come on, guy, leave him alone. To stop us doing things which were dangerous and damaging, and to enhance our potential reproductive success. But I wish we didn't feel so unpleasant, and there must have been a way of doing it. Go on, pup, go on. Which must have been a way of organising it which didn't make it so unpleasant. But as I say, I think it's those unpleasantnesses, and indeed the pleasant opposites of those, the pleasures, which are also productive of consciousness. So again, I think consciousness is not only limited, beautiful and fantastic and exciting, but limited. But I think it's also a result of and a continuance of evolutionary adaptive methods of keeping us on the right evolutionary track, using carrots and sticks to do that.